nuclear umbrella for Saudi Arabia. What do you understand by that?
You know, Pakistan is a signatory of the nuclear agreements, international agreements, and there is no way that Pakistan can extend its nuclear capacity to other countries, the whole world, to try and dismantle its nuclear capability. The GCC countries have, all told, without calling up the reservists, they have a 400,000 strength, and they have a budget which is $130 billion. So how do you bring a poor man into a rich man's world? Capacity in Saudi Arabia is finance, the capacity in Pakistan is the military clout. How do you marry these two things together? There is not a single Middle East country today which is threatening Israel. This agreement could not have been hammered together in 2 nights. And
But General Saab, United States getting back into Afghan control, Taliban Afghanistan with a military base. This is actually a bigger development than Pakistan, Saudi Arabia signing a military pact. How is it even possible? Assalamu alaikum, this is Moeed Pirzada in Washington, United States. As you know, 2 days ago on 17th September 2025, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia signed a Mutual Defense Pact, according to which if one country is attacked, it will be considered an attack of both the countries. There is a lot of speculation in international media and international capitals as to the true significance of this pact. I have invited General Retired Tariq Khan to help me explain this thing. A few words about General Tariq Khan. He has headed Pakistan's Central Command. He has also headed Pakistan's Strike Corps at Mangla. But more importantly, General Tariq Khan has served across Middle East in different capacities. He was also there during the Gulf War. General Tariq Khan, a very warm welcome to this discussion.
thank you.
General, I will come straight to the point. How do you look at the Mutual Defense Pact between Pakistan and United States?
Moeed, actually, we are discussing something which is still work in progress, and it would be very unfair for us to make any conclusions at the moment. I would like to begin by saying that any kind of agreement between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia probably is to the benefit of both countries. But having said that, I would then like to go on to international conventions where defense pacts and such agreements are made. There are 2 essential visible components of those pacts. One is what is the need for it? And secondly, what are the strategic goals that are shared between the ones who sign it? Now, those 2 are not visible to us. In this particular case, in the Saudi-Pakistani Defense Pact, the nature and character of this pact has to be seen, and it has to be measured against what we see. First of all, the nature and character of it is such that it is not through the parliament, it has not been sanctioned by the cabinet, so it is essentially a secret agreement. And we don't know the components of this agreement. And this must be understood. Secondly, Saudi Arabia is part of the GCC. And being part of the GCC, does Pakistan then indirectly also become into a multilateral, component of this whole thing, or is it just going to remain bilateral? It cannot remain bilateral. So it becomes into something more than what it is. The other aspect of this is the character of this agreement. At the moment, it's an agreement. It is not a treaty. And an agreement is not binding.
General Saab, what is the difference? Because Ambassador Zalmay Khalilzad in his tweet had raised the same point. He said, I'm not sure if Pakistanis distinguish between an agreement and a treaty.
An agreement is something which is non-binding, and you can always get out of it, and a treaty is binding.
Oh.
And so that's the major difference. So why this happened? How did this happen? And why that happened now? Some people are linking.
Before you go to this, I will actually add that I saw in a news flash, that one of the Pakistani minister, perhaps the defense minister, has said that Pakistan is open to similar requests and arrangements with the other Arab countries as well.
Well, when you make an agreement of this kind with one another, that an attack on one is considered as an attack on the other, then you have to be very careful who else you sign those pacts with. So it's not up to Pakistan now to go around signing pacts with everybody. It might go around signing pacts approved by Saudi Arabia through the GCC, but it can't go independently start signing it because it might come into conflict with what is written here. But we don't know that as yet.
But just one question, before you come back to your train of thought. it's a very common sense question that Pakistan's arch enemy is India. And Saudi Arabia is in no situation militarily to come to Pakistan's aid in case of a conflict with India. I mean, India and Pakistan are very professional military machines. And Saudi Arabia, we do not know what kind of enemies they have, but Pakistan can definitely help Saudi Arabia because of its military machine. So, how can Saudi Arabia help Pakistan?
Well, this is what I mean. We don't know the components of this agreement or treaty or whatever you want to call it. The point is this, that the capacities that are being put together here to make this treaty are not compatible. The capacity in Saudi Arabia is finance. The capacity in Pakistan is the military clout.
Hmm.
How do you marry these two things together?
Hmm.
So is Pakistan selling its military might?
Hmm.
And is Saudi Arabia buying the military might? And if it is, for what purpose?
Hmm.
And why is it doing it? So that is one thing. But then you need to remember
Hmm.
that the GCC countries have, all told, without calling up the reservists, they have a 400,000 strength of their military. And they have a budget which is $130 billion.
Hmm.
Saudi Arabia just signed a treaty with America for $142 billion.
Hmm.
Pakistan's annual budget is $9 billion. Now, there is a complete asymmetric difference as far as the military budgets are concerned. So how does this figure out, How do you bring a poor man into a rich man's world?
Hmm.
Or how do you preserve the rich man's riches? So these are the things that need to be looked at.
But Gen.Tariq, if the combined forces of the GCC countries is 400,000 plus, and the defense budget is $130 billion, as you say, and Pakistan's is only $9 billion, then why the GCC do not have a powerful military machine?
I don't want to sound derogatory, but the thing is this, that there is the gun, and then there's the man behind the gun. It depends upon how you groom that man behind the gun. Do you groom him for war, to battle? Do you do training, etc.? That's not the same as it is everywhere.
Hmm.
And the third thing is that then after you put the man and the man behind the gun together, do you put him into the environment where he can actually operate?
Hmm.
So is that environment suitable? So all these three things are seen from a battle worthiness point of view.
But
I don't think
what is the third point? When you say, do you put the man in that environment where he can actually work? I mean, what do you mean by that?
you can't take the gun, the man behind the gun, and put him in the sea. He's got to be on land somewhere to be able to operate. Qatar has dimensions of hardly 40 kilometers by about 20 kilometers. It doesn't even have a line which it can defend itself in as part of the GCC. So how does it? Why does it have an army in the first place? And all that. So these are some of the questions which go beyond what discussion we are having. But the point is here, the one that I was trying to make was that a lot of people are tying this up with Israel. Let me tell you that the bombing that took place in Qatar had nothing to do with Qatar or the Middle East. There is not a single Middle East country today which is threatening Israel. So Israel bombed Qatar only to scuttle the negotiations by killing the negotiators. They failed in them, but they managed to scuttle the negotiations. Now, this agreement could not have been hammered together in 2 nights. And if it is, then I'm sorry, this is hardly an agreement. So this was something which is in the offing for some years. It was coming and going and things of this sort, and it then suddenly matured. We can discuss why that happened now, etc., and all that. But people are trying to bind it to Israel. I don't think it has anything to do with Israel.
But Gen.Tariq, it's a very interesting point you mentioned on your own. I wanted to come to it because the whatever little we know about it, neither Pakistan nor Saudi Arabia has officially said and publicly said, any official, that this is actually against Israel. In fact, when the international news agency Reuters was asking questions to a senior Saudi official that remained unnamed, they asked him. He said that, look, this is not in response to any particular event. I mean, he meant not in response to the event in Doha, Qatar, and it is not against any particular country. And Dr. Rabia Akhtar, who is very close to the Pakistani establishment, a very formidable intellectual, has published just in the last few hours a piece in Belfer Center publication with the Howard Kennedy Center, the Howard University, which basically says the same thing, that this is not against any particular country, this is not in response to any event, this is not a nuclear umbrella, this is just an overall improving the deterrence and so on. So while the Pakistan and Saudi Arabia have not really mentioned Saudi Arabia, somehow or the other the timing of this agreement or the pact is such that everybody on the social media inside Pakistan and across the world basically see that it is this in response to this is the Pakistani Saudi alliance against Israel. So, I mean, what do you think? Why it's happening, or it's someone is planting the idea?
See, there's just general speculation about the timing because what happened in Qatar and then relating it to the signing of this agreement, everybody feels that it's a response to Israel's aggression. It has nothing to do with that because these agreements take a long time to put together. But for people to come up with huge university labels and doctorates and say that it's not against any event, it's just like buying a ticket for a movie when the movie is not screened. How can you have a defense agreement without any purpose behind it?
Hmm.
And aimless defense deal, that's what they're trying to say. I'm sorry, I don't know what kind of doctorate this person will be having if they're coming up with this nonsense. So there has to be an event. Now, like I said, it's not gone through the parliament, it's not gone through the cabinet, so it's a secret deal and we don't know actually its components.
Hmm.
They'll come out, and when they do come out, we'll be able to discuss it in better detail. But right now, if you try to search for a purpose,
Hmm.
the purpose can be manifold
Hmm.
and it can be discussed in many ways.
Hmm.
The first is the IMEC.
Hmm.
IMEC is the India Middle East Economic Corridor, which was presented by Netanyahu in Saudi Arabia, in United Nations in September 23. It was signed, in
Hmm.
fact, in Delhi. And
Hmm.
then he presented it in United Nations. Now, this,
Which is the India, Middle East, and Europe Economic Corridor, IMEC,
yes,
which
it
is
involves
supposed to
Israel.
be a response to the Belt Road Initiative.
Yes, it's a response to that, but it's encouraged by United States. It is Israel, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, and India, Italy, France, and European Union. They all signed it in 23 as an MOU. But it's not seen the light of day. And one of the main reasons why it hasn't seen the light of day is because of the regional stability.
Hmm.
One is the stability between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which can easily be handled in the future. But the main one is Yemen. Yemen actually dominates the port of Aden and the Red Sea, and therefore all these issues they emanate from Yemen. So this resulted in a problem between Saudi Arabia and Yemen. Now, Saudi Arabia and Yemen turned into a kind of a sectarian war. So Iran gets involved in it. So it becomes into a complex issue. Now, they've been trying to
So
handle it.
Yemeni Houthis are essentially Shias.
Yes, and supported by Iran. So the rest, the Saudi supported government, it is there's a kind of a rebellion, a civil war that's going on. That's a different subject altogether anyway. But Morocco, Egypt, Jordan, all these countries got together, made a coalition, and they went and attacked Yemen.
Hmm.
The only country we didn't do it was Pakistan out of all these Muslim countries in the region.
Sir, you came, see, I really wanted to come to that point because when you were initially explaining, but I didn't want to interfere with your train of thoughts. Why General Raheel Sharif led establishment in 2015 when Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, in a very vociferously asserted and demanded Pakistani troops, the Pakistani military establishment was reluctant. And you have worked with Raheel Sharif. He was with your colleague. I remember. He has been very close to you. So how do you see his mind? I mean, they refused going to Yemen. They refused helping Saudi Arabia at that time.
Well, Raheel Sharif was not the person responsible for the refusal or the acceptance. He was just the chief of the army staff.
Who was the one?
And at that time, but it was the government, the parliament sat down, and that is actually the beauty of the parliament. The parliament discussed it politically, and the opposition said, no, we don't want to get involved in Yemen. And whereas the sitting government at that time, there was Nawaz Sharif were bending over backwards, trying to get the military to enter into the Yemen war, the parliament refused.
But just
And
how the matter went to the parliament. I mean, we thought that perhaps the Pakistani establishment signaled that we don't want to, they were reluctant, and that is how the matter was presented to the parliament. Could not the Nawaz Sharif government would have actually sanctioned the military, the military arrangement without going to parliament?
I don't think the establishment was responsible for it to go to the cabinet or anything of that sort, but the establishment may have, because I had retired in 2014. This happened in 2015. And the I think the establishment advised the government that, look, if this is not going to be very popular and might work against you, so you better discuss it in the parliament and get a majority ruling on it. And they couldn't get that. That's why we didn't go.
But hypothetically speaking, if the establishment was reluctant, they thought it's unpopular, what do you think would have been the thinking, the strategic thinking at that time?
Well, one, we don't have a dog in that fight. So
Hmm.
why are you getting into it? This is a simple logic. I mean, and unnecessarily you just get involved into a conflict which has nothing to do with you.
Hmm. So, what kind of threat spectrum? I mean, we understand that Pakistan, Saudi Arabia cannot help Pakistan in the event of a war with India apart from giving financial aid. And some people say that Saudis will actually give Pakistan oil if there is a protracted conflict with India. But then some military officials said to me that in case of a protracted conflict with India, the Indian Navy can create a lot of problem for the energy supplies in the high seas anyway. So this factor, of uninterrupted oil supply from Saudi Arabia itself is not necessarily a very convincing factor, apart from the financial thing. So what can Saudi Arabia do for Pakistan?
As far as the Indian Navy is concerned, they cannot do anything inside the Gulf. And if they do enter into the Gulf, they'll probably be at the bottom of the sea because of the Pakistan Air Force. So there's no possibility of them stopping any movement out there, and nor will they ever dare enter into the Gulf area. I know what they spend half their navy on guarding their aircraft carrier, which they keep swinging around out of range of the Air Force. So that's a silly argument.
But
We'll
just
be able
don't
to.
they? But don't the Indians also have effective submarines?
Yeah, but this is not a submarine sea. The submarines have to go into a sea suitable for employment. Our coastline is not suitable for employment of submarines.
Oh.
So, so that's not possible. Anyway, theirs is, by the way. We can use our submarines there. But that's not the point. The point I was trying to make was that if it's a question of defending Saudi Arabia or really defending Pakistan, do Saudi Arabia and Pakistan need a formal pact? Do
Hmm.
they sit down, need to make a military agreement for this? I mean, the kind of relationship that we have historically, traditionally, ideologically, emotionally,
Hmm.
do we require to sit down and make a military pact if Saudi Arabia threatened Pakistan is not to sit back?
Hmm.
And if Pakistan is threatened, well, Saudi Arabia has some limited kind of noises, at least it has been making in the past, but I don't think it is going to let Pakistan get totally destroyed.
Hmm.
So this pact has to go beyond this business that
Hmm.
we talk about. If one is attacked, then the other will also get. It goes beyond it. Pakistan's military capacity is China-based.
Hmm.
Does this pact mean China is entering into this region?
Hmm.
Does it also
Some,
mean,
I saw some speculation on the international comments that since 80% of the Pakistani equipment is Chinese and Saudi Arabia also has a good working equation with Saudi Arabia, this pact means a greater involvement of China in the affairs of Saudi Arabia and in the region.
well, what it really, to my mind, it means that it could be an alternate to the IMEC proposal.
Hmm.
And this could be the CPEC, which is the Belt and Road Initiative, extending itself into Saudi Arabia now,
Hmm.
and as a challenge to the IMEC, and actually a kind of disillusionment with the US policy, with the largest bases sitting in Qatar and Bahrain, etc., not being able to protect anybody. So now, in the end, it looks like that the Chinese may be more involved in developing the Belt and Road Initiative through Saudi Arabia, which is going to get a kind of an economic corridor anyway, whether it is IMEC or it is the International Belt Road Initiative. Depends on who is running it.
I mean, I'd like to come back to this, but I have an idea in my mind. Um, uh, a short while ago, you said that it could not have been worked, such a pact could not have been worked in 2 days. And if it had been worked in 2 days, then God forbid what they have agreed. And I have read in Pakistani newspapers like Dawn that when Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif went to Saudi Arabia for 2 or 3 days in March of 2025, the headline was this, that the Saudis and Pakistanis discussed the possibility of an expanded defense relationship. And even before there were such murmurs, which actually makes me believe, as you have said, that this wasn't working. And of course, the Saudis are also saying this thing, Pakistanis are also saying this thing, that this sort of a relationship was sort of being envisaged and planned for some time. So, what do you think would be the underpinning of that relationship? If it was being worked and discussed for some time, what was that? What are they
Well,
discussing?
Pakistan really doesn't produce any military hardware except for one aircraft, the JF-17.
And the tank Al Khalid?
I don't think the Saudis are going to buy the Al Khalid tank because I at least know what it might be a very big thing in Pakistan, but nobody else in the world considers it to be a tank of any use. So the lesser said about it, the better it is. We don't produce anything except an MG1A3 and a G3 rifle, and that's all. Our military industry is zero, almost. So, what exactly can we offer Saudi Arabia? We can only offer them boots on ground.
So we
And
can
where
we can offer them
we,
Pakistan Air Force squadrons, airspace defense.
yeah, but our air forces has to be expanded then to a huge amount if we are going to offer them squadrons and also be able to guard our own skies. But personally, what I was trying to say was that actually, I think we are going to become the conduit for Chinese to enter the scene. And the Chinese are the ones who are going to set up the industry, who will set up the military potential, the military capability. And if we're looking at an industrial collaboration and a local capacity, then we're looking at a very long-term pact. We're looking at a very long-term kind of a thing. And here you must understand that things are changing in the sense that United States is losing its capacity to control the world as a single global power. So there's multi power arrangements coming up. Are we looking at the region being controlled by nuclear security providers? And if that happens, then we are going to have different orbits all over the world. So China figures out in a very big way as far as this area is concerned. And look, if China enters into the scene, that means that there is going to be a kind of a rapprochement between Israel and Iran as well. So there will be regional stability. The balance of power will be stabilized.
You said a rapprochement between Iran and Israel.
Sorry, Iran and Saudi Arabia. If I said Israel, I'm sorry about. I have made a
Hmm.
mistake.
Hmm.
Saudi Arabia is and Iran will become closer, and China will bring them closer probably. But you see, this is all speculation. All
But just,
we just
I will remind you that in February of 1945, there was an important meeting that took place in Suez Canal on the warship Quincy between Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who's commonly known as FDR, and the then Saudi monarch Shah Abdul Aziz, which was on the basis of United States providing security to the Saudi monarchy in return for uninterrupted oil supply from Saudi Arabia and the region. And that pact between United States and Saudi Arabia has held for the past 80 years. So what do you think what the assumptions or requirements of the American security to Saudi Arabia, which has been interrupted now? I mean, when if the Saudis are looking for Pakistan and say China to enter the scene, what kind of disappointment is there in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia from United States?
personally, because I was there in the Gulf War and I saw how the Americans came in between you and me. When Iraq invaded Kuwait, I don't think the Americans were needed to get there. So that was a false flag operation from my point
What
of
was the
view.
false flag operation? The Kuwait thing?
False flag operation was to get Iraq to enter into Kuwait so as to permit the Americans to carry out their operations under Schwarzkopf. So
Are you
this
saying
is
that the Iraq entering Kuwait was in fact what was like some sort of it was a false flag?
Yes, it was. And it is also mentioned by the American ambassador, the US ambassador, a lady sitting in Iraq who
April
gave,
Gillespie,
yes,
Ambassador April Gillespie.
yes. So you just read up all that account and you'll come to this. This is one contention. But what I was trying to say was that
But no,
after
but you
that,
can say, but Jalsab, you can say that Iraq was trapped. Saddam Hussein was trapped into.
well, that trapping,
Instead
entrapment
of
is
saying false flag, he was trapped because Iraq was destroyed as a result of this war.
entrapment is an outcome of a false flag operation. I mean, first you mount a false flag operation, then you are entrapped. So, uh, but what I'm trying to say is that that's something on the sideline. We can have a separate discussion on it. But what happened is that when America settled there, and I was an advisor on the Qatar regime as well for some time as a military advisor. And I know that an American ship entering into Qatar used to radio on the sea that they wanted to be received on the port. So that is the kind of power that they had. They built up the largest base in Qatar. They built up an air base in Bahrain. I saw all this happening, and in front of me it happened. And gradually and slowly, you found the Americans really calling the shots. You can't use the Saudi law out there or the local Middle East law. They have their own law, they have their own cities, they have their own thing. So I think this is time for them now to realize that they're totally being controlled by them and they need to get rid of them. So again, it is speculation.
No, but this is the control issue. But why was the Americans? You see, what was the American collective security for the Middle East, in which MBS has been saying again and again that they're disappointed, they want a more comprehensive security. What is the basis of that security?
Well, the basis of security is that they should do what that they would be more prominently involved in the Yemen war. In fact, they lost some MiGs and they lost some fighters in the Yemen war, and they pulled out their aircraft carrier from the place because it's too narrow a strait. But they would like them to be also more aggressive against Iran. These were probably the Saudi objectives. Americans would never fulfill.
But
I
just
don't know.
if the Saudi insecurities and fears are because of Yemen, because of Eastern Saudi Arabia, because of insurgencies, the kind of the tribal issues they have, and they want a collective security from United States, then do you think that China will also be playing the same role? They'll be able to there to defend the monarchy against political turbulence in the region?
You see, there are two different games in the thing. The Americans believe in my way or the highway, and they have a very kinetic kind of method to diplomacy. The diplomacy of the American government flows out of the barrel of a gun. Even now in Ukraine and Russia, they're talking about arming Ukraine at this moment, which is a very big stupidity because Ukraine has lost the war.
Hmm.
But anyway, as far as China is concerned, it is related to expansion through soft power, most through economic movements, etc., which is exactly what I was telling you.
Hmm.
And now, in the case of United States, probably Saudi Arabia feels that even the war with Yemen is not on. So therefore, they would like to get these people out of the way and come to peace with Yemen. Let the Chinese come inside and take over the security of the region and be part of a Chinese bloc. If that is the reason why we've signed this pact, I think that's a good way to go ahead.
So, what will the Pakistani military do in Saudi Arabia when you said that the only thing we can provide is the boots on ground? Say, if there are Pakistani divisions in Saudi Arabia, what would be the role of the Pakistani divisions?
No, we were once, I was also part of that. Well, I wasn't part of that, but I was later on there. But in the 80s, Pakistan had a brigade, armor brigade in Tabuk, and that was against Israel. But that time is finished. It's gone. The Americans kicked us out, Pakistan from Saudi Arabia. And America also made sure that we left after the Gulf War and we didn't stay on in Saudi Arabia
No, but you said
because
the
they didn't want Pakistan.
Pakistani brigade was against Tabuk in 1980s. But was there any threat or any ground threat to Saudi Arabia from Israel in 1980s?
At that time, there was a perceived threat. At that time, in the 80s, I'm talking about that this was a safeguard. So the armor brigade with about 10,000 troops, etc., were there stationed um in Tabuk. And I myself operated on the Karbala road, but that was during the Gulf War. And when we operated there after the Gulf War, we stayed there while trying to secure agreement with Saudi Arabia to stay on in Saudi Arabia. The Americans made sure that we leave. They
Hmm.
didn't want Pakistan to be inside. So they wanted to be the sole power sitting inside Saudi Arabia dealing with the Saudis. Now we are having an open conversation, just speculating on things as to what it is. We don't know for a fact as to what is happening
So,
because, like I said,
but Chansab, the point publicly, what the public sees as the trigger is the attack on Doha on 9th of September, in which, according to the Israeli sources, the Israeli planes didn't enter the Saudi airspace, but they flew across the Red Sea, and at a point close to Jeddah, they fired their air to ground ballistic missiles. Now, many people speculate that perhaps Israelis don't even have the kind of ballistic missiles that can go up in the space and come down and hit 1500 kilometers into Doha. But that is the apparent trigger, that the Saudis feel insecure because of the Israeli Air Force, right? So if Saudis feel insecure because of the Israeli Air Force, then Pakistani boots on the ground are hardly a kind of deterrence unless there is serious presence of Pakistan Air Force, which has actually given Pakistanis a lot of pride. So since 7th May, Pakistan Air Force is being discussed, as a formidable military machine. You say that Pakistan Air Force cannot be in Saudi Arabia. So if Pakistan Air Force cannot be in Saudi Arabia, then what is the thing Pakistan is offering to Saudi Arabia?
I really don't know. But the point is, first of all, it is wrong if anybody says that Israel did a standoff from Jeddah and hit Doha. He's talking a lot of nonsense. One route was from Jordan and then enter into Saudi Arabia and fly through the length of Saudi Arabia and go and hit Qatar, which is probably what they did. And the second one is to go from Jordan into Iraq and then fly down Iraq into the Gulf and then hit them from there. That is not likely because if they had gone into Iraq, they would have alerted the Iranian air defense system. And that would have actually made a big difference. So I personally think they flew through Saudi Arabia. The air traffic, which is, if you do a little bit of research and see, it is through Saudi Arabia. That means Saudi Arabia air controllers were in the act in this whole thing. And from Qatar, the air fuelers took off from Qatar, refueled these aircraft en route, and then landed back in Qatar. So all this was in connivance, and that is a very dirty kind of a conflict, which has no bearing on this agreement, but it happened. This is how it happened. This is how Israel does things. And probably Saudi Arabia was coerced into it, and therefore this is one of the things which might have helped them come to this agreement also, though this agreement was on the offing for years.
But if this is the nature of the dynamics, then how can the Pakistani boots on the ground change the reality?
Well, the Pakistani boots on the ground is not the point out here. This is what I'm trying to say. The Pakistani agreement becomes the conduit for China to enter. And China will make the difference. Pakistan can't make the difference. Pakistan has a fixed amount of squadrons, let's say about 30 squadrons. How can they have squadrons posted in Saudi Arabia and still defend our skies? We don't have that kind of capacity. We might be able to give them pilots, but then our own pilots will get. We have to have an event-related kind of a thing. Where's the event? So these are the issues which I don't see the practical manifestation.
Who controls? What's your understanding? Who controlled the Saudi air defense? I was reading that after 2019 Houthi attacks, the CENTCOM increasingly plays some role in coordinating the Saudi airspace.
Well, I don't know about that for sure, but I'm certain that that must be true. There's no way that the airspace of Saudi Arabia or the Middle East is controlled by anybody other than CENTCOM.
So if CENTCOM has a presence in Saudi Arabia, in that case, if Pakistan is invited in, will CENTCOM be ceding its role to Pakistan?
Well, here is where the question is. When I'm talking about when the Chinese enter into this area, would that mean closing the American bases? If the American bases don't close down, the Chinese cannot operate there.
Well, America has 19 bases in the region. I'm not sure they have bases in Saudi Arabia, but they have 19 bases in this region.
They have bases in Saudi Arabia, also in Bahrain, one of the biggest air bases. They have it in Kuwait. Do you know how many air bases the Americans have in the world?
More than 100.
700. They have 700 air bases as opposed to China, which has two out of China. One was in Sri Lanka and the other one was somewhere else, with non-significant. Two. 700 air bases. They are diluted all over the world. It
Hmm.
also guarding them. There are also other things involved in it. But anyway, leave that aside. In Saudi Arabia, Middle East, etc., nothing can fly over these bases or near these bases without the American air defense system, being part of it. So if you bring in China or Pakistan or anybody into that area, they would have to take permission from them to fly.
Hmm. Hmm. So that actually raises so many difficult questions. But there is another big elephant in the room, the situation in Gaza. What do you think is the end game? And is there any future for Hamas left?
Yes, yes. I don't think Hamas has really been affected by this as much as the civilian population because the Israelis, since they can't damage the Hamas as much as they want to, they go around killing women and children. And there's a total genocide, and they want to empty out this area and they want to do their whatever they have to do in that area, but they're not getting there. And this war is not ending, and it will only end with the two-state, recognition by Europe and by everybody else where it's leading to. And there are some countries which people are complaining, like for instance Iran and Iraq, which never voted for the in the last UN resolution, but they vote for a one-state solution, and one-state solution with the majority vote going to the Arabs. So nobody's going to accept that. That is the more extreme position to take.
Hmm.
But the two-state one is what is likely to happen, and things are moving towards in that direction.
But in the last few days, Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu, went into the settlements in West Bank and said there's no two-state solution. It's dead. And this is our land. And this whole operation in Gaza, this attack in Doha, they're all actually meant to avoid a ceasefire. And that means what Israelis are doing, Israeli Prime Minister is trying to basically create circumstances in which the Palestinians can be forced to leave Gaza. This is what I'm reading in Israeli papers.
Yes, you're right. That's what they want to do, but will they be able to do it? That's the point. And that's what the fight is about. They are wanting to evacuate Gaza, and the people from there are reacting and responding. The Hamas, you should have also read then yesterday what Hamas has done to the Israelis. The amount of ambushes took place in the West Bank also, inside Israel. The IEDs that have been there, the amount of casualties, they're keeping quiet about these things. But this has happened.
So, what is the end game? What will be the Arab states' reaction? I mean, winding up this discussion, I mean, the Doha declaration was totally lackluster despite the attack. I mean, all what the talk was about Doha, there was very little mention of the situation in Gaza, apart from the traditional words, the same used old rhetoric. So, the 50 Arab and Muslim states got together in Doha. Nothing came out about Doha, about Gaza.
It's nothing to do with the Arab states, it's to do with the Muslim states. You see, when you have countries get together and to discuss a certain problem, and that problem is related to this kind of violence, etc., then you have to discuss your capacity to deal with the escalatory ladder. There is not a single part of the escalatory ladder in which the Muslim world is going to get involved. And if they're not going to get involved in the escalatory ladder, how do they expect things to get resolved? Just by sweet talking their way through? Just like we've been sweet talking our way through Kashmir, is nothing going to happen.
Hmm. So, but are you expecting something to happen in United Nations after 21st of September when Europeans, France, Australia, and the other countries are trying to push for a two-state recognition, the Palestinian state recognition?
Yes, I do expect that. But if there is going to be a two-state recognition, it's going to be done by the Western world and not by the Muslim world. The Muslim world will follow it, but they will not be they will not be the cause of it.
Just coming back to the Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, there's a lot of speculation about a nuclear umbrella for Saudi Arabia. What do you understand by that?
You know, Pakistan is a signatory of the nuclear agreements, international agreements. And there is no way that Pakistan can extend its nuclear capacity to other countries, whether
Oh.
there is any kind of defense pact or other things. And it would be a very silly thing for Pakistan to do because then it puts itself in line for a response by the whole world to try and dismantle its nuclear capability. So whatever defense deal Pakistan has, it's not going to involve the nuclear umbrella as people generally think.
Okay. Okay, so one last thing. So before we close this discussion, In the last 24 or 36 hours, the US President Donald Trump has made a very interesting comment. He said we are in touch with the Afghan Taliban and we're going to get back the Bagram Air Base, which was left behind and everything. I mean, what kind of development is this?
Well, I think what the Afghans are going to get some funding, financial, or they release their own funds or whatever it is. There's going to be some kind of an agreement with the United States. America would like to be in Bagram with the agreement of the Afghan government. There will not be a fight this time, but they'll be able to have a major base out there. That base will be able to keep Pakistan under watch, China under watch, the region under watch, and it should be able to also start developing some kind of economic, trade and businesses with Afghanistan, minerals, etc., and things of this sort. And
But
looking at
General Saab, United States getting back into Afghan control, Taliban Afghanistan with a military base. This is actually a bigger development than Pakistan, Saudi Arabia signing a military pact. How is it even possible?
Well, it was always possible right from the beginning because United States was never really thrown out of Afghanistan. It left on its own accord, and it has been talking to them for over a long period of time. Afghanistan is under sanctions and is not being recognized, and it's not being recognized because of United States. So, if the kind of pressure that America is putting on the Afghan government at the moment, which is almost, I mean, people are starving and all. So this is the right time for them to make a mutually beneficial deal, which they probably would.
Wow, what an amazing development. Gen.Tariq, I'll end at this point, but I think let us give a few days on this Afghanistan thing, and I'll come back. I'd like to come back to you to basically look at the United States engagement with Afghanistan. Thank you so much for now.
All right. Okay. Bye bye.